Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with a friend of mine, Rebecca Plater, and she is joining me all the way from Scotland. And I am delighted to have her here because she is an artist and a writer and an herbalist. She loves landscapes and nature and things of beauty, and I just thought you might enjoy hearing from her. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Heather. I'm delighted to be invited to the Nature Collective.
And tell us where you are today, where you're recording this from.
Yeah, so I'm recording from I go between two places, and I'm actually recording from the Orkney Islands in the northeast of Scotland today. So in between Shetland and the mainland of Scotland.
And that kind of brings to mind it's midsummer here, and that makes me wonder just how dark is it getting for you right now at this time of year?
Yes, so it is light almost all night at the moment. I looked out the other night, way past midnight, and it was still very, very light outside. So we have to have blackout blinds if we want to sleep here. Yeah, it's beautiful, but different to mainland Scotland.
Yes. Wow. I can't imagine. I really appreciate the darkness for sleeping. Um, so can you tell us how you first became interested in herbs?
Yeah, so I think that I've had a love of plants and landscape kind of baked into me from a really early age, both by nature of circumstances, but also by nurture of my caregivers as well. Say my grandparents on my father's side encouraged a love of gardens and plants, and then my grandfather on my mother's side used to take me wild blackberry picking along the hedgerows in Norfolk. Um,
Oh,
Yeah, and my parents always lived in really remote places growing up. So throughout my childhood, I was immersed in these environments. I grew up kind of in rural Norfolk, spending summers on sticky salt marshes, collecting foraging samphire, mussels, cockles, and whelks, and then followed a short period in the West Country of Cornwall, roaming amongst the wild bluebell woods and rare mosses of Bodmin Moor.
mm.
Um, and then I spent my formative years on the remote island of Sanday, Orkney Islands, which is where I am now, but this was a more northerly island from where I am now. So it's about an hour and a half north from here. And kind of running barefoot amongst the kind of cold Caribbean like beaches and wading birds, wildfowl, otters, seals, and killer whales. So yeah, I feel it's very much part of my character and being, these
Wow.
landscapes.
Okay, can you tell me, is Orkney like Shetland where there's very few trees and it's more
Yes,
open?
yes, definitely. They're very windy islands, and there's never not a wind. It's incredibly rare if the wind drops. It's almost like we wonder what's happening.
Yeah.
And so there's always a light wind, which is great because we don't get midges like the West Coast. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, we have to kind of batten down the hatches quite a lot, especially in the winter. So yeah, and I suppose I transitioned kind of to herbs because really came about when the COVID pandemic hit, like many others. Our lives were kind of turned upside down. And so we moved back to Orkney from Norfolk, which is my childhood home. And whilst here, I think I was kind of propelled back into the nostalgic memories and surroundings of my Orcadian childhood. So I began to kind of reground, heal, reconnect to the land and to my childhood spirit,
Mm.
um, as well as nature, the surrounding plant life, animals, and actually just the indigenous islanders' way of life. It's so much slower paced here
Mhm.
than anywhere else in the UK. Um, so yeah, and then once the pandemic kind of blew over, we began to split our time between St Andrews in Fife and Orkney, for kind of family and work reasons. And I think I then went on underwent an even deeper healing process, which involved healing deeper layers within the kind of mind body entanglement.
Mhm.
Like, so I did a lot of yoga, somatics, cranial sacral, acupuncture, And whilst I experienced this, I kind of allowed myself to be held by nature's intelligence within these kind of wild landscapes of like thick forests of the highlands and the wild islands of Orkney.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then kind of, I think by permitting myself the time and space and the freedom to really immerse myself in these wild spaces in a kind of childlike, playful way, and like exploring, connecting with them from my heart space, I began to see myself as part of nature again, rather than separate from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we end up becoming separated from nature, I think, in our growth into adulthood in some ways. Um, so kind of, I think through that, new parts of me were cultivated and began to grow. And being in the Forest of Fife, I began to apply that kind of exploratory process when foraging for food, and also for my art. So I began re-observing and reminding myself of nature's intelligence, its interconnectedness, and remarkable ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, like when why and when it rests, such as like when it goes through its wintering period and things like that. So I think that's how I began to transition into herbs again in my adult life. Yeah.
Wow. So So I love this this thought of becoming like a child again and just playing in nature. And
Mm.
I think that's so much of what has to happen to us as adults in order to reconnect with nature. We just have to give ourselves that freedom to play and enjoy our surroundings. And it does bring back that sort of initial connection in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a surrendering in a way to
Yeah.
that child state and nature itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so can you describe the landscapes that you are live between Orkney and Fife, and maybe similarities and differences and what you find yourself really connected to?
Sure, yeah. So I probably start with Orkney. I mean, the landscapes I live in now have equally as much to offer as those when I was a child. So the mainland of Orkney is slightly different to the island I grew up on. And as we just said, it doesn't have many trees, but it's really rich in wild flora and fauna, and fertile land. There's a lot
Hmm.
of farming that goes on in Orkney.
Okay.
Um, I mean, it was once conquered by the Vikings for its fertile soil. They invaded here for just that. So it was owned by Scandinavia until the 1400s, where it was lent to Scotland for a debt, but
Wow.
never returned as the debt wasn't paid off. So, um, which is quite a good
Wow.
story. But subsequently, the Orcadians are very much Scandinavian descent.
Okay.
So their folklore, literature, place names, and it even had its own language actually until the 1700s, called Norn,
Wow.
which I think they still speak in Iceland. Actually, it's the same language. So it was an indigenous language, which has sadly now been kind of lost. But yeah, so there is plenty to forage here. I'm going to kind of take you through just a few things. There's so much to talk about that I couldn't talk about all of
Yeah.
it. But so dandelions is one big one. So you can I've done a reel just on dandelions on my Instagram page. So it will give you some information about that if you want to have a look. Watercress, sheep sorrel, red clover, which is extremely useful for things like menopause.
Okay.
Scurvy grass, which is high in vitamin C, chickweed, elder trees, which are used to make ointments for sprains. And then yellow iris is one of the most abundant wildflowers on the islands, and it's beautiful to see, but it's also got lots of properties like antimicrobial, diuretic, burn treating. The seeds can be used to make things like a kind of coffee drink and stuff like that. So and then you've got meadowsweet, which is also a great alternative to kind of almond flavoring.
Ooh.
And kind of, I know it smells almost like almond when you sniff it. It's delicious. And then, of course, we have plenty of seaweeds to forage along the shore. I've got a really good book on seaweed foraging, just seaweed foraging, actually, that I can drop in the link. Um, there's plenty of mushrooms, bog cotton, and then willow is one of the only surviving trees here because it bends in the wind. That's why, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of the most common trees on Orkney. And it's been used for generations for things like basket weaving and herbal remedies. And where I am on Orkney, we have a beautiful sheltered walled garden. And because the islands are so windy, it's really good for growing things. We're able to grow things to create a kind of homestead situation here. So we're really lucky. So yeah. So I'd say that's, and obviously there is just so many beaches because you're never far from the sea on Orkney. So yeah, you're always near a beach.
Wow.
And it's always empty as well, which is lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and what would be different about Fife? I guess you don't have as much wind and you have more trees.
Yeah, so like moving on to Fife, it's full of forests and hills.
Okay.
I overlook the Lomond Hills, which are the backdrop for the Falkland Estate, which is quite significant because, well, not only is it kind of like an ancient rainforest of Britain, which is kind of completely unmanicured, so it's not really forested that much, and things are left quite naturally. But it's also the estate of Queen Mary of Scots descendants, and it's her old hunting ground for wild boar and that kind of thing.
Okay, so
So
is this attached? Is this attached to Falkland Palace?
it
Or
is, yes, yeah, that's right, yeah. So and actually, Falkland Palace has an incredible kind of down in its basement. It has this incredible herbal room, which is set up as if it was set up back in the time of Queen Mary.
okay, so
Yeah.
just a very quick aside, Queen Mary has always fascinated me. And I have visions in my mind of some kind of a book about her that is all about nature and Queen Mary, since she was
Oh,
so into, oh, the word has escaped me, with her falconry and
yes, yes.
of these things. So anyway, it's exciting to think that you're talking about the Falkland Estate.
Yes, that would be a great book. I mean, she is, I mean, very well loved in Scotland, but it's kind of steeped in this history. And the village of Falkland is actually where Outlander was filmed. I don't know whether you've ever seen that, but yeah, that's so
So
it's
actually, so funny. Our family happened to be visiting Falkland Palace on the day they were filming. One of the days they were filming,
oh,
they were repainting.
funny.
They were repainting all of the houses for the filming, and then they were having to repaint them back. Yes, it was funny.
Really
Yeah.
amazing. It's a beautiful village. It's got such a lovely feeling about it. Many people have walked the path of that village before, in a kind of ancestor way. And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of people visiting because of Outlander and also because of the palace.
Right.
But then if you go just out on the edge of the village is the estate.
Okay.
And there's this beautiful forest, like the stables are there. There's an amazing organic farm shop called the Pillar of Hercules, where they sell all fresh organic produce and they grow it on the estate. And there are beautiful waterfalls as you climb the Lomond Hills, and as you kind of they get larger as you rise with fresh streams and water. So yeah, and then there's a great book which I've written here called The Lost Rainforests of Britain,
Ooh.
which your readers and listeners might be really interested in. So I can drop that in the link as well because it kind of gives them a good history about all the lost rainforests of Britain. But it goes into detail um, about where the rainforests were, and actually this forest that I'm talking about in the Falkland Estate, it feels like those ancient forests that he speaks about in the book. So it has this energy about it, and it's really old and really powerful. And I'm not sure if it's because it's the kind of home of Queen Mary of Scots as well, but there are also like mini woods and forests stretching out from this estate across the whole of Fife, which I
Mm.
visit daily and I forage daily in those. I sometimes spend hours in the forest, and my husband's like, "Where are you?" I'm just
Okay, so
absorbing the, incredible energy of the forest.
yes. Okay, can you just explain quickly the rules of being allowed to roam and or forage? Are you allowed to roam
Yeah.
anywhere?
Well, technically, you're allowed to roam anywhere in Scotland, and I think you're technically allowed to take what you need. But if you started selling things commercially, or I think that wouldn't be allowed. So there
Okay.
are a number of, which I can also drop in the links, like guidelines on foraging in Scotland. And I would advise, if someone's going to start foraging in their own area, to get a local book. So I have a book called it's called the Handbook of Scotland's Wild Harvests. So it gives me guidelines on foraging, like mushrooms and things like that, because they can be dangerous if you pick the wrong ones, and also
Right.
where you're allowed to go and what you're allowed to take. But I things to forage in Scotland are vast, but I forage things like mushrooms, wild chestnuts, wild barren strawberries, brayberries, bilberries, rose hips, elderberries. I mean, the forest floors are also full of so many things. So
Mm.
I make things like gorse leaf tea and wild chamomile tea as well. Some those are both on my reels on my Instagram if you wanted to look at how to make those. So it's a good way to kind of learn how to make them.
Okay.
Um, so yes, I also use a plant identifier app as well,
Ooh.
called Picture This, and it's brilliant. It gives you everything there is to know about the plant or the berry, and it's pretty accurate most of the time. So yeah, the two landscapes are very different, and they both have beautiful things to offer about them. Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. It's so exciting to think that you are there in the forest where Queen Mary was. Okay, so now you're surrounded by all of this beauty, and your interest in herbs has sort of been rekindled since COVID. So how did you go about getting your training or mentoring or learning about all of this?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is there's many ways to learn, and you have to do what's comfortable for you. And I've been down a few different paths and then settled for the path that I find the best for me. So I began exploring kind of a self-taught process, just exploring kitchen and first aid cabinet herbalism. And that was
Mhm.
through various books and videos and people who were teaching herbalism. Um,
Did
I
you
was
take
for
did you take notes and put it in a journal, or I don't know
yeah,
how did
so I would get recipes and keep a recipe book of
okay.
different tinctures or different things that I would use in the kitchen. I also would put a lot of herbs into a lot of cooking. So there's lots of different ways you can go about it, but I would look up individual plants or herbs and see what they would be good for. So if I had something I needed to treat, then I would look at the herbs that could treat that thing, whatever the ailment was. Um, and then I suppose that I foraging the hedgerows, for food and using it in my studio to kind of imprint into clay and create monoprints was quite a self-led process, and it was with curiosity, which is sometimes led by seasons, or the art of noticing and immersing myself in the landscape. So it was quite an organic process,
Mm.
and the more time I spent there, the more I discovered. And sometimes I would connect with a certain plant or group of plants that helped with certain things, such as adaptogens or something. But then I eventually signed up for a course in herbalism with the Natural School of Medicine. But I found this way of learning a bit of a struggle for me personally. I
Mm.
think it's just the way that I learn and absorb things. And I
Right.
found that I was absorbing things more in action than
Yes.
theory.
Yep.
Um, and that really just depends on what kind of a learner you are. So I much preferred the immersive, connected ways of learning. But then equally, I began to float into the realms of using my forage collections into my artwork, which meant this process naturally consumed more of my time and energy. Um, but, plants, herbs, botanics are so versatile and cross over so many worlds in art, kitchen, herbalism, and then medical herbalism, that I think you can learn it in all these ways,
Yeah. Sort of whichever strikes your interest, go down that route because that's where you're going to learn the
Well, that's
most.
certainly the way I was led, but I know some people like a lot more structure than that, and they like kind of very academic based learning. But I think you learn so much more about the actual plants and what they can do for you if you're working with them.
Yeah.
And you're more connected rather than in a kind of disconnected way. And also, I did learn, I've got lots of scientific biological books about learning about whole structures of plants, because each part of the plant can be used for a different purpose. So you can use the roots for one thing and then the flower for something else. And some plants you can't use the flower because it's poisonous, but you could use the part of the plant that grows under the ground. So there is the biology and scientific side to it, and there's some really good books on that as well, which help you along the journey, because you do have to be careful when you're using them. They're powerful things.
Yes. And I guess another theme that's kind of coming through as we talk about this is you really have to slow down in life to get interested in this and to learn about it, because it's not you can't just go to the grocery store and pull something off the shelf. Here you have to go out to the forest, you have to find the plant, you have to learn about the plant, you have to figure out how to prepare it, and you maybe have to be able to gather enough to actually make something. It's just much more time consuming, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's a very slow process where that's concerned. There are certain quick recipes you can find, and there is a way of buying herbs online, of course, and there's some really
Oh,
good
sure.
companies where you can, if you just want to make things, it's very different to foraging and making. Mine is very season led. It's very in the moment. It's when it's there, and I
Right.
love that part of herbalism and foraging, because yeah, it just keeps me in the moment and in touch with what's the season. But
Yeah.
there are lots of people who will just make remedies or just make skincare products, or use specific herbs for specific things in the kitchen. So it just really depends on what route you want to go down, and nothing's right or wrong, it's what's right for you. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, have you met up in person with anyone that maybe is also an herbalist and done things together like that? Or is it more through books and online in that one course?
I think that a lot of things are done online now. So there's herbalist groups online. There's also lots of mini courses online you can do, which I've done. And then there's kind of lots of groups you can join where you're chatting with people. And I think because I'm in quite remote areas, there are local people to me
True.
actually that I could easily go and do, or meet herbalists. There's herbalists down at Falkland Estate as well.
Okay.
But mostly mine's been done mostly self-led,
Mm.
online, or through books and things like that, because I just kind of follow my nose.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Good, because that means this is very applicable to all of us who are listening. It's something
Mhm.
that you can go out and learn and do as well. So,
Yes. Yeah.
okay, tell us how all of this relates to your art and your creative side.
Yeah. So I'd just say that bringing the holistic spiritual mind body work together with herbalism, plants, and the landscape felt very aligned, and it all started to feed into my studio artwork,
Mm.
um, which kind of keeps everything authentically connected in a funny kind of way. And um, like I said, when you have to get out and collect and forage whilst a plant, berry, or mushroom is there, it's a really good motivator, a
Yes.
natural motivator. So I began from foraging to imprinting things into clay and hand building ceramics. and kind of using my learned skills from monoprinting on my illustration course that I did. And from that place, I began kind of creating my own natural library of clay objects, both in printed and hand built pieces of exploratory imprints of in all sorts of weird vessels, which maybe weren't practical, but they were exploratory. And then this developed organically into me recently launching my first range of ceramics called the Foreshore collection, which is focused mostly on shells that I've collected on St Andrew's Beach in Fife. And Orkney Islands as well, like kind of scallop shells and things. And then I also have a library of botanical monoprints collected from plants and leaves from nature throughout the whole year, which I'm currently framing some and then developing others into more advanced artwork. But I quite like to leave my artwork and put it to one side and then come back to it sometimes months later, and then something else speaks to me from the artwork.
Yes.
So yeah, I find that, like, let it marinate, so I've also spent 2 years developing a color library for both the clay and the watercolors from natural world colors that I see in nature.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I've got like a whole collection library of that. And then I think mark making in watercolor with brush strokes, again through a very playful sketchbook process of seeing patterns and shapes in nature, and then just kind of them filtering through onto the page. And then I would look at those and they kind of lent themselves to shapes or possible objects. And from there, in a very organic way, I began to see in the brushstroke mark making shapes like flowers of the natural world, but not necessarily realistic versions, more kind of playful, abstract, suggestive representations of those. And then I progressed on to bringing these imaginative images to life and took those into designs for homewares, which is my new collection, which that I launched at Christmas. But I think on that, I also wanted to make something practical, which was longer lasting, good quality for people, as well as aesthetically pleasing, and something that would bring people joy in their everyday tasks within the home. And I think I'm, a conscious creator and an advocate for positive luxury and buying better. So, as a person starting a business now, it was really important to me to put inspiring change and sustainability at the heart of my business. It's kind of all influenced by my connection to nature, but both my childhood and again in my adult life, I like to kind of encourage responsible ways to shop and promote more conscious, ethical way of life.
Yes.
So kind of creating this functional, beautiful lifestyle products using sustainable materials where possible was the route that I wanted to take.
That's so wonderful. I just kind of having this bird's eye view of your nature connection beginning as a child and the landscapes that you were connected with then, and then how you were reconnected with them as an adult and became interested in the herbs, and then the time that you spend in the forest and by the seaside, and then how you've been recording it with your watercolors and in your sketchbooks, and then seeing it come out in your pottery and your home goods, your line of home goods things. It's just amazing to see all of your life kind of come together with your love and connection of nature now to what you're working on in this present time. And I feel like it's an inspiration to those of us that are listening to keep going out in nature and noticing what's around us, and just doing those simple little acts of noticing the colors and putting them in our sketchbook, and maybe just noticing the shapes, very, very simple shapes, and putting them down. And hopefully everyone will take a look at these beautiful products that you've made and kind of see what you've done and be inspired that their sketchbooks can contain some of the same amazing information.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope it inspires people. And yeah, like you say, it's about these little things, these little moments that, the reflections on the water or the leaves rustling. And I think somehow it was kind of filtered in, and then it just kind of came out on the sketchbook at a later date. It must be something like that. So, or even the sunlight through the trees, and yeah, and looking at the different shapes in an abstract form as well. And
Mm.
I think if you can get quiet and still enough inside, because often when I go to the forest, my story mind is, circulating for a good 20 minutes before I finally settle down and start to really absorb and notice what's around me, which is why
Mm.
I give myself so long in the forest. So I hope that helps other people connect to nature in that deep way.
Yes, that's really good advice to just give yourself as much time as possible. So, as we're coming to the end of this time together, which has been really wonderful, is
Mhm.
there anything that you want to recommend, a favorite herbal remedy or recipe or book?
Yeah, so I've got a few, and I think because there's so many elements to herbalism. So you've got the kitchen herbalism, and I'll just mention a few which are on my Instagram page where people can have easy access to look at how to make them. So one of my autumnal favorites is apple and rowan berry jelly. Rowan trees are native to Scotland and high in vitamin C, the berries are. So a summer favorite in this is her kitchen herbalism is elderflower delight, which is delicious. And that's on my Instagram and YouTube page. And then I guess a summer garden favorite from a walled garden in Orkney is honeysuckle honey,
Ooh.
which is really good going into the winter because it gives lots of protection properties. And then there's things like elderberry rob, which is like a syrup you can drink throughout the winter to keep flus and colds at bay. And so herbal books, I've got three that I like, and I've tried to recommend them to cover kind of wider field of herbalism. So my absolute favorite book is Energetic Herbalism by Kat Maier. She's an amazing experienced herbalist in her field and specialises in energetics. She has a lot of experience. I put the link in there for that. And then a really good book for people to read if they want to know more about the history and of Western herbal medicine is Green Pharmacy by
Ooh,
Barbara Griggs, sorry. It
okay.
was a real eye-opener to me, and it gives people a really good grounding in the history of herbalism and the Western medicine. And then I thought this would be useful for people who wanted to grow herbs in their garden or start to grow, in their garden, is the Healing Garden. And it's by forgive my pronunciation, Juliet Blankespoor. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I'll put the link in the comments. So that's, yeah, really, really good if you want to start growing herbs in your garden or in a bigger homestead situation and then making things from those herbs. And then there's a couple of books that I love in terms of nature connection and how we can be kinder to nature.
Yes.
One, probably a well-known one called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Uh-huh.
And the other one is Fibreshed by Rebecca Burgess, where I got a lot of influence for my organic fabrics from, because she talks about the chains of how fabrics are made and everything. And then just a few influences and good sources. So a really good herbal podcast is called Herbcast. Their,
Oh.
their Instagram page is Herbal Reality, but their podcast is called Herbcast.
Okay.
It's really a trustworthy source, let's say, because there's lots on herbs out there, but that's a very good grounded, trustworthy source. And then herb suppliers in the US, there's one called Anima Mundi herbs, which she's a Costa Rican herbalist. Also offers great herbal courses as well, online. Um, then another amazing herbalist is somebody called Rosemary Gladster. And she, I believe, offers courses online, but she's also very experienced. And then there's a company called Herbal Academy, which I think is based in the US, if that's helpful for you. Again, they're on Instagram. So yeah, so there's just a few things there that might be helpful.
Thank you. This is such a wonderful list, and I'll make sure that the list and the links and the names of the books and everything are attached to this audio wherever it's posted. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining me today. This has been so inspiring personally and just a real joy to hear of your connection to nature and be inspired personally to go out and experiment and learn a little bit more about herbs.
Oh, thank you, Heather. It's been a delight to join you, and I'm just really happy to contribute and help where I can and be of service. So thank you.